order. Start out with the roll call. Ann?
Here.
Jeannie?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
Larry?
Here.
Where's Stacy? Stacy?
Here.
Okay, fantastic. Gang's all here. Notice a meeting?
The meeting was properly noticed.
All right. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. If everybody would join me in standing to say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And our favorite part of every meeting, Spotlight on Learning.
Mr. Sniff?
All right, everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So normally at this particular meeting, we would introduce our foreign exchange students, but we do not have foreign exchange students this year, and so we had to punt a little bit and go in a new direction. And so we wanted to share with you a little bit about our homeroom structure and where we are headed with that, and highlight a particular success story that I would say that we like to shine here at the high school. One of the things that I think was one of the most important steps in my career was moving from teaching high school to teaching middle school. When I was teaching high school, people would ask me, well, what do you teach? And I'd say, well, I teach math. And when I switched over and started teaching middle school for a few years, middle school kids are a whole different ball of wax. And so they take a little bit of a different approach. And I realized through that process that I was really teaching kids math. And that's a simple thing to say, but the reality is it's an important thing that drives the way in which I have led my career, is to think about the idea that kids come first. And I think at the high school level, frequently we run into an over-focus on the content. Now, the content is important. I'm not going to suggest that it isn't, but we do need to think about our students. We do need to think about having a student-centric school and getting students to feel connected to that school. Our youth risk behavior assessment data that David Woodford presented on, I think, at the last school board meeting, indicated that 7 out of 10 students from 2 years ago, 7 out of 10 students reported they had an adult at the school that they felt connected to or that they could go to. And that may seem like a pretty good number, but if you think about 3 out of 10 students saying they don't, that equates to around 240 kids at the school say they don't have an adult at school that they would feel comfortable going to if they had a conversation that they wanted to engage in. And students can get connected in a lot of different ways, band, football, drama, whatever it might be. Kids find their spot within the school. But a lot of kids don't. And so how do we ensure that every single kid has an adult? Everyone has a person that they can go to. And that's why this homeroom structure exists. We want to divvy up all the students and say, every student, here's your adult. Here's your person. Here's your go-to person that you can go to. And so that's really our starting point, is really just simply the idea of breaking the students up and giving every teacher, every staff member, myself included, a homeroom to work with and have those students as their focal point. We have some different activities and opportunities for them to make connections. This is where we do our academic and career planning. This is where we have some wellness and care activities that we want to focus on, and also some goal setting work. But ultimately, where we are headed is the idea of really building strong relationships through this system. Our homeroom structure is a 4-year process. So once you're assigned a homeroom teacher, you have that person the entire time. And sometimes I think it takes a little while to see the benefits pay off. Sometimes it's even after a student particularly graduates. And so we want to tell a little bit of a story to give you a little bit of inspiration when you think about what homeroom is about and where we are headed. Some folks just sort of take it and run. Kathy Walls would be an excellent example of that. She is a bit of an expert in this field. Now, the interesting piece about Mrs. Walls is the idea that she's a tech ed teacher. She's not a psychology teacher. She's not a sociology teacher. She's not a relationships teacher. She's a technology education teacher. Now, I'm not cutting on technology education teachers, but the idea is she is a teacher before anything else. And this the student-centric approach, I think, is absolutely critical to the way in which we do things. So I'm going to let Kathy tell a little bit of a story about her homeroom, and she's brought a couple of her homeroom students along with her this evening. That just really shows the sort of connection that's there if we can get kids to come here on a Monday night at 7 o'clock to do a little presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and then I'll just close with a couple comments once they are finished.
Okay, good evening. So I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about homeroom and what it looks like. Homeroom, in my opinion, is a place where everybody belongs. I think that everybody needs to have a spot and everybody needs to have an adult, kind of like Mr. Sniff said. So 4 years ago, I was given this group of 16 kids. And aside from the fact that they all have that same gray background in their yearbook photo, and the fact that they were assigned to be my people for the next 4 years, they didn't really have a whole lot in common. They come from different backgrounds. Were raised with different values, different philosophies. They, in fact, also have different paths that they want to pursue after high school. So, again, aside from that gray background and the fact that they were mine, there wasn't a whole lot that was in common. So my goal was to take them from cliques and strangers to this, where they were more like brothers and sisters. These are just a few examples. I have more of them, but a few examples of how they got together. So the magic question that I hear from just about everybody is, how do you do it? Some people think that I just got lucky. I got the 16 best kids in the senior class, or the class of 2022. My biased opinion, maybe I did, but I also think that they work really hard to be this family and to be brothers and sisters. So I brought Will and I brought McKenna with me. Actually, they volunteered. To come with me to share a little bit about their experience and the journey that we had. So we're going to go back to freshman year, and we are going to talk about first impressions, or their first impression of homeroom.
So when I first was assigned to Mrs. Wall's homeroom class, I was not enthusiastic about it at all. I saw going to homeroom as more of a chore than the pleasant experience that I do now. And rather than having a bonding experience with Mrs. Walls, I kind of saw it as someone who wanted me to cooperate with the activities that the guidance counselors were giving me to do. And I was more of an arrogant freshman versus the more mature version of the person I am today. So I'm very grateful for homeroom for the opportunities that it has given me to change myself.
Like Will, I also kind of found homeroom a chore. I was like, why do we have to be here this early? And then I got there and Miss Walls scared me because I told her I was talking to a friend who I was walking into class with about how the classroom was in a scary hallway. And as I walked in, she was like, this is not a scary hallway. And I was like, okay. So I was very scared at first. And then she started talking about how, like, we're supposed to be able to come to her for anything and, like, we can talk to her about feelings. And I was like, you just scared me so bad. Like, why would I ever talk to you? I don't know you. You just scared me. Like, not a good first impression. Why would I ever talk to you? And now I talk to her every day. I don't have to be in school, and I come to school just to see Miss Walls and talk to her, tell her about my day, and she listens to everything. So.
Okay, so you can see I didn't necessarily have a great start with these kids. I scared them, despite the fact that I did bring them donuts. None of them remember the donuts. They remember being in the scary tech ed hallway and me apparently yelling at them. Luckily, they don't remember the fact that I couldn't remember their names, and I kept calling them by the wrong name and saying, maybe your parents just gave you the wrong name to try to cover my tracks. So somehow we got through it, and what happened was I entered these kids' lives at a point where they were in the middle of their stories. They had a history together. We did have some kids who were coming to PHS for the first time, but a lot of these kids already had stories and already had connections. So what I had to do was I had to try to work with what I had been given, and I had to try to use those connections and break down any barriers that were developed. Oops, sorry. So my goal became to give the kids value. And these are some examples of the things that I did over time. There were a lot more examples, but the bottom line really is that there's no one size fits all. There wasn't any one thing that I did that's the magic nugget that made these kids care about me, that made them buy into homeroom. It was a number of little things that I did over time. So again, I'm going to ask Will and McKenna to kind of share what it was that kind of stuck with them or resonated with them, and we'll kind of go from there.
So the experience that really changed my perspective on homeroom is actually not listed on the Give Them Value slide, but it was actually of February of 2021 where we went to The Rock in Franklin, Wisconsin to go tubing. And this was a day where me and I think only a couple other of the homeroom students could spend an entire day with Mrs. Walls and really bond with her. And throughout talking through the entire day, going down the hill with her, going on trains with her kid, I really bonded with her. And after that, rather than seeing her as just a teacher and someone who I kind of had to cooperate with to get the assignments done, I saw her more of a friend and more of someone that I could really share personal aspects of my life with to really grow into the person that I've become today.
Okay, so the slide says paper hugs. So for sophomore year, we were virtual for part of the year because of COVID, and she was very stressed about how she could still make connections with us. Like, you could tell from all of the emails that she sent and how much she tried to contact us. So one day we got a big envelope in the mail, and I remember seeing that it was from Miss Walls, and I was like, oh. But I had remembered that we got an email from her saying that there was a surprise. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a video of myself opening this because I'm a teenager, and that's what I do. And I ended up crying because she had gone and made rainbow paper hugs for all of us. So it was like a head and a body and literally like an arm's length that you could wrap around you to get a hug since you can't have human contact. And then she had our check-in form on it so that we could still, the check-in form is on the slide, we could still get in touch with her and tell her how we were feeling. And I remember hating the check-in slip at first because I was like, I'm not gonna talk to her. I don't want to tell her my problems. And then I started opening up on them so much that she was like, we need to talk more than just in resource. So those were two really big things that stuck with me for homeroom.
So for different kids, different things make them connect. And obviously every teacher and their comfort level is going to be a little bit different. But whatever opportunities you give, if you're consistent, I can't get this forward-backward thing going on. If you're consistent, ultimately, that's what matters. So long-term consistency, showing up for these kids every day for 4 years is what's going to make a difference. It doesn't necessarily matter that I was going tubing with my kids and invited the homeroom kids to show up as well. It doesn't necessarily matter that I'm artsy and craftsy, and I sent them paper hugs. It's that, I see them every day. I say hi to them. I look them in the eye. I make a point to make them feel heard and seen in this building. I seek them out, and I give them the attention. So ultimately, it's that consistency that makes a difference. The hard part is, when do you know the success has happened, and how do you know that it's working? Because one of the things can be, just like I've seen a video, and kind of the example is you go to the gym, and on the first day you go to the gym, you don't see any changes, so you kind of quit and you give up. Well, it can be like that with teenagers too. You don't see any good reaction and you give up. You're like, why am I bothering? Why am I putting forth this effort when they don't care? But then, kind of like Mr. Sniff said, one day, all of a sudden it clicks and it makes all the difference in the world. So I have a number, sorry, the font I guess is a little small, a number of different examples from our homeroom of when success happened or how to measure that it happened. And then one more time, I'm gonna ask these two to kind of share their personal experience, but these were kind of across the homeroom.
So as I mentioned before, when I was a freshman, I was pretty arrogant and extremely self-centered, to be fully honest. And I think one thing that I learned through the almost 4 years that I've spent in homeroom was developing empathy for other people, where in terms of conversation, if the conversation did not really mention me, I would not necessarily be interested in it, versus now when Mrs. Walls kind of pointed that out to me and developed exercises and we had conversations to where I can change my ways and become more of an understanding and empathetic person, I think that is something that I will use every day in my life in terms of my high school career, my professional career, and it's really just allowed for a really special spot for Mrs. Walls in my heart.
Okay, also just to prove what Will said, I was scared of him at the beginning of freshman year, and now I can go to him with my problems, so it is very true what he just said. But my big thing was Miss Walls would work with, I hated opening up to anyone. I pretended that I told people how I was feeling, but it was all just really fake. And then I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and I did not want to tell anyone about it. And I don't know why, but I knew that I could open up to Miss Walls, so I did. And she really helped me work through that. It helped me understand my feelings and understand that, like, my diagnosis is okay and it's normal, and, like, I'm allowed to talk to people about that. It's not just asking for pity. She really, really helped me with that so much. And now, like, I love talking about my feelings, and I love helping others talk about their feelings the way she did that for me, because it saved me. Like, it seriously saved my life. I don't know what I would have done without her last year, and I love knowing that I can do that for someone else.
So in the end, I took 16 kids with the same background and not much else in common, and I turned them into our own special little family, simply because there is value in everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, please? Yes, Stacy.
So I am one of the 16 in Miss Wall's homeroom fam. She is a star that shines so bright in this building. I can't even, the bar that she has set as this homeroom teacher, Sarah's my third, you all know that. I'm so glad I don't have a fourth that wouldn't have her, because that just would never compare. And that's no criticism of the other teachers, but Miss Walls has just done such an amazing job in that role. And she not only has had that impact on the kids, as they spoke about, her emails to the families and keeping them informed and just sharing what they're doing as a group have just been constant. So seriously, you are a star.
I'd also like to say I haven't had Mrs. Walls as my teacher at all during high school, but the times that I've like interacted with you, like even like from we had a conversation today, and in that conversation you made me feel really seen and heard. So the fact that she's having an effect on me, I definitely throughout the school, you are definitely well known for how you are with the homeroom. So just being able to see what exactly you're doing is really, like, I think a lot of people can learn from that, and I think what you're doing is spectacular.
Kathy, obviously you do a great job with this, but I have a really interesting question.
Sure.
So did you get any paper hugs back or not?
No, I didn't.
Mine is hanging up in my room, though.
But I was going to say I got a lot of selfies with paper hugs, which is, I think, the teenage equivalent of getting one back. Yeah. The fact that I made Instagram posts and, yeah.
That's high praise. Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
If you make the gram, it's high praise.
So Brian, how would you assess the success of this? Is this something you really wanted to do? I know you came in and talked about it right away when you became the principal here. This was something that was really important to you. How do you view the success so far, and where do you think's left to go in terms of the journey through the homeroom?
Yeah, so not everybody's homeroom story is going to be the same as what you just saw. This
Yeah.
is really an example of where we want to head so that everybody's experience. I mean, imagine if students and teachers talked like this about one another throughout the building and not in some unique circumstances. We have run into some challenges over the last couple of years because of COVID, because of start and stops with when we could hold homeroom. We tried doing virtual Wednesdays with having homeroom at that time, and there have been a lot of things that have complicated the process in growing this. But ultimately, now that we have a much more consistent schedule, we're trying to use these sorts of examples, and Kathy's a bit of an inspiration to me, and I already believe in it, and just to be able to bring this to other staff. And so we kicked off this year really kind of focused on looking at some of those statistics about why we need to care about our kids. Because that's really what comes through, is the idea that, you can just tell they know she cares about her. Or them, excuse me. And that's, if a student knows that you care about them, you can really get them to run through brick walls for you and go, such a far distance. And that's what we want to see for everybody.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, just maybe one other thing, and I know that there's more research out there. I'm somewhat familiar with it, but the idea of establishing these relationships is really, really important. But what else does it do, Brian? And maybe we heard a little bit of that tonight in terms of the experiences that the students had. But because this is about, they perform better, they are more connected, they have greater outcomes in terms of academic achievement, I assume, right? I mean, there's some components of that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, our goal is that we won't let anyone slip through the cracks. If I'm supposed to keep track of 857 kids, somebody's going to fall through the cracks. If our 3 counselors are going to keep track of approximately 300 kids apiece, somebody's going to fall through the cracks. But if we can whittle it down to every staff member saying, here's your 15 kids. You're in charge of making sure they graduate. You're in charge of making sure that they're successful in a more holistic, like you're their life coach, if you will, sort of approach. We will have more successful students. We won't have kids that miss out ultimately on our end goal.
That's great.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for being here tonight. Kathy, thank you so much for going above and beyond the extra mile. It doesn't surprise me. That's just your nature. And thank you guys for coming in here and sharing your stories. And, Will, it's good to see how you've evolved and how self-deprecating you're willing to be. But I couldn't agree more. I mean, the relationships are the foundation for everything. You want people to learn. You want people to be successful. You want them to be happy. That's where it all starts. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great job, guys. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is comments from citizens. I don't know, Julie, did you get any slips?
Sandy.
Or Sandy? Hey, Sandy.
Sandy.
Oh, I did not get any. I have one.
Okay.
Hello, Jennifer.
Good evening. I wasn't sure if I was going to say anything tonight, but I've been contacted by a lot of people about the policies for homecoming and was contacted by just 2 more in the hour before the meeting. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to get up and say something for all these people that have some concerns. I think our school district has done a great job so far this year having rational and reasonable COVID policies. And people are very appreciative of that. And I think this is the first time this year that people are feeling like maybe our policy isn't as sound and rational as it should be. And I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but essentially we are telling anyone who wants to go to the homecoming dance that they have to get tested unless they're vaccinated. And it just doesn't seem completely rational because we know people that are vaccinated can get and spread COVID. So we're drawing a line in the sand that's, in a way, putting pressure on our kids to get vaccinated when families have some real legitimate concerns about the experimental vaccine and its side effects for kids. So this is, and I've already felt it with my teenage daughter who had COVID. Mom, I feel like I should get the vaccine. Everyone's getting the vaccine. I'm worried that I'm going to be excluded from something if I don't have the vaccine. She had COVID in March. We all did, and we have natural immunity. And I have studied this. Natural immunity is proving far better than vaccine immunity. And I even wrote a letter that I shared with Stacy that I'm willing to share with the entire board about all of the studies that have shown how effective natural immunity is. If we want a rational policy, we should also carve out people that can prove they've had COVID within the last year. But truth be told, when kids are going to Brewers games, going to Bucks games, going to football games, crowding together, being unmasked all day at school, it seems a little punitive to draw this line and ask them to be tested to go to homecoming when they have no symptoms. So my opinion is we shouldn't be testing anyone asymptomatic. There's no real reason to, there's no real justification to do it. But if we're gonna test people, then we should acknowledge that natural immunity is potentially even better than vaccine immunity.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. A couple of comments. One, we brought that up too with the Waukesha County in our last call because I don't disagree with you at all in the natural immunity. Right now we are leaning on all we have is that 90 days is what they're willing to give us, is that 90-day window. And what I asked the director of Waukesha, I said, so, I'm hearing maybe there's a 10-month thing coming. He said there's ongoing studies, but it hasn't been pushed out there yet. So we feel we're kind of stuck on that 90-day because that's what we've given, but we certainly, so in everything that we have in terms of a policy, anybody that's got that confirmed past 90 days, we treat them exactly the same. You know, you make a good point. I mean, the intention of the approach is to, one, have mitigation, trying to have a reasonable mitigation in place, because you put 600 kids in a gym, and if anybody's been to a dance with 600 plus kids, you know, that's an environment that certainly could be conducive to spreading virus. So we're trying to have reasonable precautions. It's not about, we've never taken a stance on the vaccine, and we're certainly not trying to push people to do anything. That we're just trying to find what's reasonable. The data shows that, and I would say it's probably the same or equivalent, but they don't publish that, right, for previously infected, is that those that are the unvaccinated have about 3.5 times the rates of infections currently than the unvaccinated. So that's one of the rationale pieces for the difference, is just, hey, we can't prevent.
Break it out based on natural immunity.
Yeah, it doesn't. I wish it did. I really wish it did. So the piece there is we can't, right? There's nothing we can do to say we're going to have a dance and guarantee that someone can't get COVID. They can, right? You could test someone and they could be positive 2 days later. One of the problems with COVID is that people are actually most contagious 2 days before they have symptoms. So at least that's what I understand and what I've read. So then screening testing is a strategy that we've tried to employ. So the reason and you're right, with breakthrough infections, those things can happen too. So the safest thing would be to test everybody. But we felt that was under that reasonable standard and of not testing more people than was necessary to say, hey, we've taken reasonable steps to mitigate. So I appreciate everything that you had to say. I just wanted to provide a little bit of the rationale, some of the thought process that went behind it. So.
Do we have any more comments?
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, guys. How's everybody tonight?
Good. Yourself?
Good.
Good.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Serbian. I have an 8th grader at Asa Clark. I, too, wanted to just touch on the COVID protocols, and I know that you had a closed session before this, so I'm not sure if things will be changing or not, because I know you're going to be talking about that later as far as what has been going on with that and if you're going to be changing it or keeping it the same. I just had a few questions, and one of them is, how are you as a board and as an administration making sure that you're following the HIPAA laws when it comes to students that are vaccinated or not vaccinated, when you're promoting vaccination and also, having to notify if there is an outbreak and things like that? So I'm sure the school nurse probably has the records of who's vaccinated and not vaccinated because of the state registry of immunizations. So that is one of my questions, just to find out what you're doing to ensure that. And also wondering, as far as the mask or facial covering exemption goes right now, I do have one of those on file for my son, and I do have several reasons why I don't want him to have to be masked in school. And I am wondering that if this is something that you're going to be removing, the mask exemption, or if they issued a statewide mandate or something that schools have to have all kids masked, if we'd still be able to have our mask exemption on file for our students.
I can comment. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think it depends on what the mandate looks like. So,
Okay.
I think that's pretty much out of our control. So if they allow it, if they would ever mandate it again and didn't allow exceptions, then we would have to follow that. But at this point, it doesn't look like that's in the works to have any mandate, state or countywide.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the bus piece. It's, it's above our level of authority if it gets to something like that, but I personally doubt that'll happen. In terms of our plan or locally, that would require all new board action to change the plan that we have.
Okay.
And we haven't had discussions about doing those things, and it's not something that's a recommendation tonight when we do our COVID update. So,
Okay,
in terms
that's
of the
good to
mask
hear.
piece, and I'm sorry, the question on HIPAA. So, that's in essence, you're talking specifically about the homecoming piece.
Not just the homecoming piece, but in general. I mean, with sporting and, the different sporting teams and stuff in the school, it seems like people are talking about whether or not they're vaccinated or not, as far as coaches and things like that asking. And because if there's an infection, it seems like they're treating the vaccinated kids differently than the non-vaccinated. So I guess that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, currently, so it's up to someone to disclose that, yes, the nurses can check the registry to confirm those things, and they have that access as medical healthcare professionals. And there are differences that can be in play for quarantine procedures. In terms of the guidance we have currently, there's not really much difference because close contacts that are asymptomatic are not required to quarantine at this stage. Now, if we go up levels, it becomes more of an issue, especially if we go up like to red, then it becomes more of an issue. Individuals that would choose not to disclose would, so for example, if we get to red, if you're not vaccinated, you're required to quarantine. If you're vaccinated, and this is a CDC piece, right? You can get tested and return if you're negative. So those are down the road pieces, but currently there's really not much difference in terms of how there's in the plan that's in place right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, moving on in the agenda, going down to salutes and recognitions, I'm going to go to Stacy because she started one here earlier. Would you like to give one off to Ms. Walls? Huh?
Make an official one?
Yeah.
I would love to give an official salute to Kathy Walls for the outstanding job she does as a homeroom teacher.
Thank you for that. Are there other board members that would like to give a recognition or salute? Well, I'll open it up to the administrators.
You got one, Danielle?
Yeah, just salute Laura Howard, Dan Deuce, Sarah Gull, and John Stangler. We had a bit of a pipe burst at PLE over the weekend, which resulted in Laura and Dan's shared wall getting a little bit of a waterfall, and therefore their offices needing to be evacuated this morning, and that creeped into our library space as well. And so lots of people joined in very quickly to make sure that the spaces got moved, and so very, very minimal damage to materials and things of that nature. But Laura and Dan are going to be, misplaced for a couple of days while the repairs are already underway. John was really fast on that, and there were guys already in there by like 9 o'clock this morning. But just kudos to them for taking it in stride and just rolling with it on a Monday and being willing to still service their kids. I saw Dan with a group of kids a little bit later that morning and stuff, and so just kudos to them for rolling with things go.
It's too small to be a new pool for this?
Yeah, too small to be the new pool.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. John?
You'll hear later in the meeting here with John Stangler and Sean Strauss giving the update from the summer projects and the work that was completed this summer. Just the amount of planning and everything that goes into the number of capital projects, nowhere near what we had last summer, but in a summer like this, and Sean hitting the ground running, starting in the position and not skipping a beat with the cleaning of the buildings and the preparation for the start of the year on top of all of the other projects that were going on. They did a great job this summer.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I have a couple. You're going to hear John talk about Third Friday counts tonight. So Sue Gross, I can't remember if we saluted her at the last meeting or not. So if we didn't, I want to make sure we salute Sue because she plays such a big role with that count, which is an important report that we do each year in terms of our enrollments. Which affects our funding. Candace Bentley, who's in the middle of completing the civil rights report that she has to do every year, which is a big task as well. And then I want to recognize John Gahan and our principals. We've had some ongoing issues with bus routes. Route number 4 in particular has had some issues with us being able to staff it in the last week or so. John and the principals have worked sometimes in very short notice to communicate to parents to adjust bus routes, and I also, would acknowledge our parents who have been pretty patient with some of the delays of 20 minutes, half hour or so, some for kids getting home at times or getting picked up. So not ideal, but the driver shortage is a real issue and it's happening everywhere. But John's been very on top of it with our principals working through that. So wanted to acknowledge them.
Thank you for that. All right, let's move down to the consent agenda. We have minutes from the previous meetings, the regular meeting on the 13th and the business affairs meeting, correspondence, which I don't think there's much of, and there are no gifts this time. So unless there's questions or corrections, I'll look for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signal by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries 6-0. Down to new business, where we're going to talk about that summer campus improvements, the update. So,
John and Sean.
All right, just making sure it works. Okay, thanks for having us tonight. Just want to give a thank you and shout out to all of you for providing us the resources and budget in order to complete this. Complete all these projects, but then also I want to thank the community for approving the referendum, because some of these projects are still, some of those referendum projects that we've been able to take off of our long-term capital projects plan and take care of within that budget. So first I want to kind of shout out a lot of the thank yous. John was mentioning there's like I got a whole list of people to thank and companies and vendors that we utilize. So I'll just start rattling them off, and then we might interject a couple of the names in with certain projects that we completed over the summer. I want a big shout out to PLM, Tom Opie, and Joe Stapleton. The amount of pride, like say them hanging up that sign that we received from Sam Garrett's and D&H Enterprises. The amount of pride, both being past graduates, hanging the sign, getting a picture, it's very impressive. And even for like PLM, there was one night that 4 of the 5 divisions for PLM were on campus all doing stuff around the stadium. So it's pretty crazy. He's like, I wish I would have had a drone picture, because he literally had 4 of the 5 divisions on campus at one time. I mentioned Sam Garrett's, but the metal signs, that's tremendous. They look awesome. They turn out really well, but I want a big shout out to them. Also Kemp and Masonry for taking care of the columns and ticket booth at the new entrance. Pewaukee Youth Football. I want to thank them because they donated and help us out with funding the stadium improvements. Also want to thank JWI Industries. They're the ones that completed the bleachers. CG Schmidt, their special projects group, Jared, Sean, and Eric, just for helping us out. There's a lot of random things that they took care of. And then, from the bathroom remodels to, helping out with a little bit of oversight, like for the concrete and making things happen out at the stadium. Cablecom helping us out with, wiring. Pieper Electric, who's still a little bit on site, some more miscellaneous electric work. Kathy Walls and C.J. Schmidt, primarily her civil engineering and architectural class. They're the ones with the big gazebo in the PLE courtyard. We want to thank Dillette Mechanical, Property Services. They were on a quick bind there right at the end of the bleachers to get a lot of the landscaping done. So we were able to get a lot of landscaping done before the first home game, which helped out tremendously. Northway with the fencing, Cornerstone with the plumbing, Lippert Tile, with the cafeteria, Gexpro. We have Next Electric, Belter with the, some of the improvements in the cafeteria, the serving area, Kessenix, Nelco Electric. They were with the fire alarm at Horizon. Lewis Sound, critical to have a PA system and speakers and everything else operable for events at the stadium. So they're help us out there. Breezy Hill. Also, McKenna Eels was here. You'll see her little work with the robot book. The book. The little book library, free library. You'll see on PLE's playground. You'll see a picture of that. So that was McKenna Eels and Kathy Walls and Karina Wright as well. So they're all kind of helping, and then we put in some concrete, and you'll see that in a moment. But those are primarily for a lot of the summer projects who we want to really think and point out. But then we'll just kind of roll through. So Sean, if you want to start.
So first off, we have some safety enhancements that we did this past summer. Also, we photographed the graduation this past summer too. I was a week in at this point. This is my third graduation of the week, so it was a great time meeting all the community members, seeing everyone together. We actually placed 1,100 chairs on the football field, which every one of them was filled up with family members and students, and even some of the bleachers were actually filled up as well. So some of the safety improvements that we did this past summer, so some of the campus improvements we can go through.
Sorry. Not even touching it.
So,
All right, there you go.
So campus improvements, we have a list of all the campus improvements, and some of the campus improvements were items that were already in the school district right now and then relocated. So we actually relocated the P from the cafeteria and relocated it to the stadium area, which becomes good photo ops with family members, students, and staff when they go out there.
And we just had part of it electrostatic painted this morning. So the red portion was painted this morning, and then in 48 hours they'll be painting the black. So it'll be electrostatic painted. So it'll be weathered and be really good for the future. And that was straight from the class of 1979. That was a class gift, right?
Yeah,
78, 79.
We had talked, we didn't want a new old rusty, like you remember the water tower? We wanted to make sure we got that. We didn't want to add a new old rusty to the community.
John Mulch's graduating class.
Yeah.
Is the one that gave
I
that.
thought you were pointing at John Gahan.
No, he knew. Yeah. I think it's 78, it's John Mulch's
That was
class.
4th grade.
Excellent. So you'll see pictures of all these improvements in the next couple slides.
So we did some exterior signage this past summer. Has really helped out the community and even other teams coming in where to go for drop-off pickups areas, and just having brighter acknowledgement of where to go for this district. Pergola looks nice.
Pergola, gazebo. This is the Kathy Walls. So I mean, you can see it. It's not completely finished. We still have a little work to do with the roof, but it still turned out very, very well. And if you're over at PLE, feel free to check it out. It's a great asset for that courtyard.
John, I'd just say make sure you guys are, because is that for the live stream?
Yeah.
Jackie?
Can
I
you
just
hear
want
me
to make
okay?
sure the live stream
You're
picks
getting-
you guys up. With
Let's
your
say I have
commentary.
not a loud enough gym voice, so I think it'd pick me up.
So the next one is the high school restrooms right around the corner at 227 that were remodeled. So we actually remodeled with the epoxy floor, new partitions and new lighting, really amped up the restrooms from what they were. We also did the restrooms over by PLE, same thing, we did epoxy floor, new partitions, new lighting, really has amped them up, and this is located right by the Champions area, right across from it. So the cafeteria remodel and serving line. It was, as you see in the left photo, the serving line was actually in the kitchen area where kind of funneled all the students in, and now with the serving line actually outside, it actually gives an open area, gives more room to the kitchen area, so they have more area to prep. Also with the lighting, actually really brightened up the area with the floor as well.
So let's switch over to bleacher replacements. So obviously on the left-hand side is the old visiting bleachers. So trying to do a little before and afters. I know a lot of times we always get the after photos, we don't always necessarily get the before photos. So before, you can remember that there's two little sections of bleachers, so we were able to relocate the existing visiting bleachers down to baseball, and then also move to set over by softball, just to add more seating for those locations, but then also be able to utilize. The existing home, we weren't able to, reuse just because of the size, material, and then also like bringing stuff up to code, because if you touch it, you have to bring it up to code with bleachers. So here's the visiting bleachers. So you can see a little work in progress on the left-hand side, then placed in the press box on the right side. So capacity is just over 500 now, elevated on the wayside, where before it wasn't elevated. So really the only top 2 rows were usable or at least visible to see the field over the football team. So here's the new visiting bleachers, and then it's got the full enclosure underneath. So we got 2 little areas underneath each of those, or underneath that particular bleacher set. So definitely a nice little upgrade from what we had prior. And then I hit the button. There we go. So here, the nice thing is there's the after, and then also on the right-hand side, you can see it being used. So that was against CMH the other night. It was great to it's great to see people in the stands, and it's great to see the spaces being utilized and, you know, what the intended, you know, item was beforehand. So here's the home bleachers before. So before we had just under 1,000, you know, seats, depending upon what size you use per seat or per butt, they say. So obviously it was a little undersized, and you know, we grew over time, and we needed an upgrade. So, and now, you know, we're up to 1612. So 1612 on the new home side. That's the capacity. We also have the nice little viewing deck up on the top row with the vomitory in the middle. So I love saying that word. So the vomitory is located in the middle. That's the little outlet in the middle of the bleachers that goes underneath in the middle. But then we're also able to reuse the existing home press box. We reused it, rewrapped it, and used it on the visiting side. So we're trying to make that just a better, you know, venue, but then also, you know, we can put the visiting coaches over there, and eventually we're working on the details right now to have a student broadcasting crew on that visiting side. So we're able to get that wired. So I talked about Cablecom. We're able to hardwire from the fitness center corner to the visiting bleachers for the hardwire. So I just mentioned it because I was talking about the press box. So, but the home bleachers you can see on the right-hand side, nice little view of the lake with it. And then you can see, I mean, even against CMH, that was 85% capacity on there for that game. So it's just great to see it used. It's also valuable from a safety perspective because, all right, we have less students that are playing because there wasn't a seat for them before. Now they have a seat. Now they can sit with their parents or, the guardians. So we don't have to worry about them playing or, run around by the jump pits. Yeah, Larry?
And it's maybe not quite as clear, I think, whatever it is. So it'd be on the left-hand side of what they're seeing, right? There's the full band. The band is able to have a full section in the bleacher section. The students are there with them, and there's still plenty of room in the bleachers for the home team.
Yep, so. Very much so. And yeah, before we ended up having a smaller bleacher set off on the side. That's where we put the band, just because we didn't have the space on the home bleachers. So, it's a great benefit for everybody to have that new home bleacher. And I mean, for years to come. So that's the best part about having those bleachers. And then also even attracting, playoffs, stage, level 3, level 4, level 5 playoffs. We're a great venue, just off of 94 that people can go to. Second grade, Nature Hill. I want to thank the second grade team. They had ran their launch cycle, and part of their launch cycle was to add bins and benches to the nature trail. So we had 4 benches and 4 garbage cans to the nature trail. They're spread out throughout the trail. They help, I walked with them because they did their little nature hike on a regular basis. We determined locations and also made sure that, location and type, were carefully selected. But that was, just a great thing that we're able to get the kids involved, and, they were able to walk through their launch cycle in making this happen last year, because they pitched this idea. All right, we're able to give them a little bit of budget. Here's what we're looking at doing. They helped paint those benches. The students at high school helped make them. Just another great thing to get the kids involved in the process. Some of these, some of those random things that we do every year, getting the gym floors refinished, putting mulch on the playgrounds and making sure that those play sets are properly padded with, mulch. So these are just some of those random things that we do every year, but obviously it always gives a nice shine when they have a new coat on them. Here's the PLE Playground Library robot we were talking about before. So it was before on the left, and then they installed on the right on the after. So just a nice little thing that we added to PLE's Playground. So if you're over there, feel free to check it out. And again, that was McKenna Eels and Karina Wright and Kathy Walls for making this happen. So it was one of those random things that, hey, I got an email, I think it was late July, early August, like, hey, we need to get this in before school starts. I'm like, okay. So we're trying to figure out, we're, trying to check out the base. So like, all right, how much concrete are we gonna have to put this in order to make sure it doesn't tip over? So just, one of those awesome things that we're able to get the kids involved again, where, all right, we get to see it. Here's some of the great wrestling room improvements we were able to make. You can see they have padding now on those walls. So beforehand, that was just a block wall. So if you, had a maneuver or got lifted into the, area, you're going into the wall, not necessarily padding. So we're able to pad them. Also, you'll see chin-up bars on the left-hand side. There's a TV monitor in there. And then also, we're just working on the last finishing touches of wrapping some of those walls with some graphics and also properly highlight and display all those student athletes that you see spread out throughout the walls and throughout the whole space. So, and then we also have some wrestling cubbies that are going to be installed probably in about 3 weeks. Hopefully we'll get them in right before the wrestling season starts. So those are ordered. But some of those nice improvements just to, take value to the space and also making sure we're utilizing each space effectively. Here's some of those other stadium enhancements. So remember the gate beforehand was on the left-hand side. We have the old Firestein Field sign with the planter bed on the right. On the left, we were talking about the P, and then the gate entrance, we're talking about Sam Garrett's and D&H Enterprises. Some of those great things that we're just able to add. We have a really nice Firestein Field sign inside on the left-hand side now too. So just, trying to keep the stadium entrance just from a security standpoint, just be a little bit more effective. We got a new ticket booth there. So, 12 years ago, I remember, they had the ticket booth. It was the north wall of the concession stand, and then we filled it in, and then now we have a new space for them. So it's crazy to watch the evolving, but then also just how nice we're able to kind of make it more of a stadium entrance and not just a field entrance. And nothing against Firestein Field. It's just a matter of, we wanted to give a little more of a wow factor when you walked into the entrance of the stadium. Pupil Aid's entrance, so I want to give a shout out to Miranda Kozlik on this too, and Ben Graham for helping her install it. So you can see if you walk in the front of the Pupil Aid entrance, this is right above the library. So these are some of those things that you don't really see unless you walk into the building, but then you're like, wow, it's really cool. It's the lakefront of Pewaukee. And you have the clouds, and the only thing I was like, hey, we need to add a sun. So we're working on, we have to get a sun up there yet. And then also you're going to see Pewaukee Lake, welcome to Pewaukee Lake Elementary in the blue here in lettering in the near future too. But just some of those creative, things that Miranda is definitely added to the district, and also just the uniqueness and, the bringing Pewaukee, the lakefront, everything right into our buildings. So. Some shed improvements, so we were able to get this insulated and heated. Before, when we were doing snow removal and you had to go work on a piece of equipment, it's maybe 50 degrees in here if you're lucky, or maybe 40 hopefully, if you're working on something from a snow removal standpoint. So now, it's comfortable at mid-60s in the middle of winter, so if we're having to work on equipment, but also taking care of some of the new equipment, say we just bought the skid steer and that Snow X on the left-hand side in the middle. So we bought that last year as well, so we can do a little bit more stuff in-house. Also, same thing, easier to clear the playgrounds, some of the other parking areas. Trying to do some more of that stuff in-house, but just having that insulated and heated is definitely helping. One, help us take care of the equipment. Two, be able to service equipment if we need to, and then three, just being a little more comfortable when we're performing all of the work. So. Some bubblers. So this is kind of one of those random things that, we thought about it 8 years ago, and strategically we just kept adding water bottle fillers. So these are two that we did last year, but pre-COVID we actually had at least 2 to 3 in every single building prior to the shutdown. And then when we were able to resume in person, we only had the bottle fillers active and operable. So it was just one of those things where I'm like, we had we were forward thinking enough to add enough of these bottle fillers ahead of time. So we weren't scrambling to add them when, people resumed last year. So it was just one of those random things that, hey, it was great forward thinking by us to try and get that in ahead of time. So these are just the 2 we had last year, but we're just continually every year we've been adding 3 or 4 and just trying to switch those over to have bottle fillers on them. Just more usage, and we could track it, and they have filters on the left-hand side too, so just nice to have. New boilers, PLE's basement, so the 404 section, so the west side of the Pewaukee Lake Elementary, that's the part that received these new boilers down in the basement, so you'll see these. They're, new boilers, so, I know they're, it's more up maybe our realm that, all right, we're highlighting boilers, but they're boilers, and, in order to heat the building, we need them, so.
I get excited about boilers, so it's okay.
All right.
We're all excited
I know
about
you
the
do.
boilers.
Some of the concrete replacements, this is another thing that we've just been continually doing over time, replacing concrete sections, heaving, cracking, whatever it may be. There's items and, sections of concrete they replaced. I think this year we replaced, 25 to 28 sections of concrete that were just, all right, I don't want an ankle turner for a kid. I don't want, we don't want that. So from a safety perspective, it was just the right thing to do, and just start replacing. We're to the point now where, all right, we're probably going to have to replace maybe 10 to 15 sections maybe on an annual basis, just because we've been able to, strategically just, take care of the neediest items or neediest sections of concrete first. So here's just some more, entrance, the crosswalk at the high school, we fixed that too. It was just not wide enough, and then we were able to add the plates on there too. So it was just, one of those random things that we just do. The other crazy things that we have going on yet, we have some doors being replaced here later October, so the couple off days, and how we just have to be strategic with utilizing those non-school days, because those are the best times to get some of those projects done. But then also, we're seeing craziest lead times and supply chain issues all across the board. So we just have to, we're strategically utilizing any of those non-school days. We're using them for anything and everything. It could be fire alarm testing, it could be sprinkler system testing, it could be any of those random things that we have to sneak in on these non-school days just to make it happen around school. So, questions? Yes.
Steve, I have one question and one admission. The sound system is all in for the stadium? I know that was one of the long
installed
lead time.
today.
Came today.
It was just installed today. So I know it came in recently and had it all lined up, and it was just installed today. So sorry, I didn't get any pictures of that, but we were out there checking with Lewis Sound, and they're able to make that happen today.
Good timing, and to my embarrassment in front of my superintendent, I have no idea where the wrestling room is. I always thought this was like a mystery thing.
Well,
like,
and you got to remember
does
this
it really exist?
wrestling mezzanine. It was expanded slightly when it changed from the gym to the auditorium, because you used to have used to overlook the old gym.
It's up there?
Over the old gym.
So it's literally just to the west, up on the second floor of the existing auditorium.
Oh.
So that's where you'll find the rest.
You go down the back hallway of the auditorium,
Yeah.
there's like a weird little staircase that
Okay.
goes up, right by the fitness center. That's the staircase that goes up
All
to the
right,
rest
I
of
gotta
the
check
room.
this
I'll
out.
happily give you a
there's
tour.
You used to be
access
able to
from
find
the-
it with your nose, but
No, well, and we
Take a
have
right,
another
keep
machine
going
that
straight
we
down.
utilize in
There's
the
an access
football
from that side,
locker room
too.
and also in the wrestling room.
Okay.
So we used to doing it. So if you walk down the back hallway, you're not smelling the football pads anymore. I mean, we use that machine there, but then we also double it up and we use it in the wrestling room during wrestling season. So
Awesome. Thank you.
questions?
One thing about that is I'd like to acknowledge the Booster Club, because
Yeah.
I know Ed had
Yep.
submitted grants, and so they funded the pull-up bars and the climbing ropes and those things that were added. So good support. Just another good example. And like what you said about PLM and Tom Opie, he's always so good to us, and Mr. Garrett's with. It's just great to have the kind of support that we have with these kinds of projects.
Yeah, it is.
just great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
That deserves a round. Other questions before we let them go? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is a curriculum renewal schedule update, and Danielle's here to present a change in the renewal process, or not the process, but the
calendar.
calendar.
dates.
Yeah, and so, Steve had asked me a question over the weekend that I was able to get back to him, and you have the memo that outlines the details. But essentially, as you know, most every year we bring this up so that you can see what the calendar is, which we did in February. And primarily then the changes were to make sure that the budget was kind of budget neutral, so that in the teaching and learning department we didn't have years of high budget need and then low budget need. Over the course of the summer, we had a couple of things move up as prioritized need, which I outlined specifically our Alt-Ed program, which has had historically very low numbers. We're seeing an increase in numbers primarily from students coming from other districts that we're inheriting and needing to provide need for. And so that's a program that's been historically run by one person, been able to personalize, and is in need really of a comprehensive review. We anticipate that we're going to continue to see numbers from other districts coming to us as other districts continue to make decisions around the pandemic, and that impacts kids in different ways. And so we want to put some resources and leadership support and staff support behind that comprehensive review, as well as library media. We were waiting on some staffing. We had originally moved that back a year. We were able to, as you guys know, increase our staffing here at the secondary level, as well as it became a goal in the strategic plan as we outlined, as the strategic plan unfolded over the last few months. And so we would like to move that program review forward. So because of those, we needed to look to see what could we move off to ensure that we had leadership and staff capacity and that it also remained budget neutral. So my recommendation is to move physical education and health back a year. We're waiting to find out if the nutrition standards are going to be rewritten at the state level. They were out for public comment in August. They were reviewed by the state superintendent on September 14th. They've not revealed the findings of those review just yet. So if they were to rewrite them, and generally speaking, when DPI puts something out for public comment, it means they're going to rewrite them. It would be redundant work if we were to start to work on Phy-Ed and health now and then have to use new standards and relook at everything. So it just made sense that way to do it. And then we were able to just kind of shift around, move back math and world language back to their normal cycle and stuff, which ended up working real well. So I'm happy to answer any further questions that anybody might have. Otherwise, I would.
Board members?
I have one, and I apologize for not getting this to you in advance, but I know earlier on or a few meetings ago, you talked about being able to incorporate in additional public or parent citizen input, if you will, into curriculum. How, does that affect or change this calendar other than you have to have a longer lead time?
It doesn't affect anything on this calendar, so just as an update to that, and I provided something in the DA report as well, is that one of the things we had committed to in the spring was increasing transparency of our curriculum. So our curriculum and all of its supporting documents is planned to be posted on the website by mid-October. It's a very, very large undertaking to get everything formatted correctly and pulled correctly, so we're working on it. I've been spending lots of hours on that, so that will be posted on that, and a part of the input then that the community can have as well is that as we go through each phase, that will be posted on the website as well. So the Ela Phase One Report, which is what Ela, English Language Arts, will come to you this spring. That Phase One report will be out there by mid to late October as well. So no, it doesn't change anything as far as this calendar in those pieces. You know, for science that is starting Phase One this year, we will be doing and seeking some type of stakeholder input as we go through that process here in Phase One. So, which will probably be more like winter to springtime.
I mean, given that this is somewhat new, I mean, how are we communicating that to our parents and citizens, if you will?
Yeah, so we're still working on the full communication plan, right? And so obviously the first step is to get it onto the website so that it's fully transparent out there. And then we'll work to determine what's the best mechanism to, you know, to alert families and stakeholders that that's available to review.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve the revised curriculum renewal schedule as presented.
Move to approve the revised curriculum renewal schedule as presented.
Second.
Sorry, Stacy.
Thank you, Steve and Stacy. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 All opposed? 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Third Friday count update, and I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, traditionally, we take this this meeting at the end of September, and we'll give you a verbal update on the Third Friday count. This count is due to be reported to the state by October 1st. So we're still in the process of just validating all of the student counts, not necessarily the ones that we have here in the district, but a lot of that goes around some of the students that attend other places, either through virtual schools or attend other districts through open enrollment, who all go towards our count. There's two counts during the year, the third Friday in September and the second Friday in January. The second Friday in January is averaged with the third Friday in September and added to our summer school FTE that we can count to determine equalization aid for the following year. So it doesn't bear the same weight as the third Friday. Third Friday has several purposes. It helps us to set our revenue limit for the year. The revenue limit is the combination of state aid and property taxes. So it has a lot of bearing on what the level of the final tax levy is going to be that's adopted by the board at the end of October. Another purpose for the third Friday count is to determine per pupil aid for the district. So you take a 3-year average of the third Friday counts and multiply that by the $742. That's a categorical aid that we get for funding throughout the year. So that gets informed by it. Third purpose, which the governor committed to providing additional funding to schools for this upcoming year from part of his discretionary federal funding. That number will use, the third Friday count will be used in determining what that funding level is. So we anticipate we'll hear about that in the next couple of weeks after the third Friday reports are submitted and before October 15th. So as we go to the October 25th board meeting is where the full budget will be coming, and then we'll do a reconciliation. We'll give you a good idea, some more data around the count. But I wanted to give you a clear picture, or a preliminary picture of where that count ended up and what some of the data around there, trends that we're seeing. So I'm gonna start with when we looked at last year with COVID, the biggest decline that we saw in student enrollment with COVID was at the early elementary grades, between 4K being the largest drop in the district, all the way up through 3rd or 4th grade. This year, if we look at our cohort, those cohorts, so the kids who were in kindergarten last year or who were in 1st grade this year, what happened to that number? Did it grow? Did it stay the same? Did more come back? So we look at that cohort survival ratio. Typically over the last 5 years, our 4K to 5K survival ratio is about 122%. So we grew about 122% from 4K to 5K, notwithstanding any other circumstances outside. This year, that cohort survival ratio is about 135%. So we had a larger number of students who didn't attend 4K who are coming here for 5K than what we typically would have seen. Our 4K enrollment is up about 30 students from where it was last year. Typically, we were ranging around 175 to 185 students in 4K in a given year. We're back to 171 students in 4K this year. So rebounded on that one. Let's see. Overall, the elementary student population from last year on the third Friday to this year on the third Friday grew by about 3.5%, excluding the 4K number, because we know that one went up substantially more. So that was good growth. That was good rebound in the elementary numbers. On the secondary level, relatively flat. The numbers of students from last year came back this year. We kept a pretty same ratio across each one of the grade levels. So overall, the head count in the district went up by 15 students. So I'll give you a reminder, there's a couple of different things that we talk about. We talk about head count, we talk about resident head count, and we talk about FTE, full-time equivalency of students. So the total head count, the total number of students in the buildings went up by 15. The resident head count went up by 4. So we picked up a few more open enrollment students than what we had before. And the resident FTE showed a decrease of 21 FTE. The reason for that is 4K students count in the full-time equivalency as a 0.6 when you're doing the calculation of full-time equivalency. So as we get to the 25th of October, Where those numbers sit right now, that's where we're at as of today's count date. We'll have a couple more verifications that'll come. We'll end up real close to that. I anticipate that when this is filed, it'll be real close. As you know, in the past, sometimes we'll pick up 1 or 2 kids here or there during the year, at which point we amend the count and we include them for our final numbers, just to make sure that they're recorded then in subsequent years. The full impact of what happens with this, we'll analyze that as part of the budget adoption process that comes back on October 15th. So we'll bring that to the board. You'll be able to see then the impact on the revenue limit from what our preliminary budget was to where we are right now and what that means to our final budget. Any questions?
Steve, you had some questions this weekend when we talked to you.
Yeah, so, if I'm looking at the pages from our annual meeting, it looks like then, our FTEs are gonna be down about where they were like 2013 levels?
Our FTE will be, I haven't compared it to previous
Okay.
years. It's just slightly lower than what it was
Last
from
year.
the COVID numbers, so, yeah.
Yeah, so that looks to be on the graph, it's probably somewhere between 2013, 2014 levels of students, so we've definitely lost ground. Yeah.
Well, ask it a different way. Is there anything in the trend lines that would make you nervous about financial sustainability?
The biggest impact from these numbers, the biggest defining impact that I can tell you from the enrollments in that, we had a class of 12th graders that left the high school that was 45 students larger than the class that replaced them at the kindergarten. So the biggest class in the district that has been going through for the last 10 years, of almost 240 students, graduated last year.
Yeah.
So that's where the majority of that impact is. That's
Yeah.
almost a 2% change in enrollment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if that's a trend, though, that we should expect to see. I mean, I've been hearing prior to this year that nationally, what I think is this year's 10th grade class is going to be the largest class nationally that we're going to see in the next 20 years. So may have already hit that point in our community. We may have already hit the point where we're going to start seeing the effect of declining birth rates in this country in terms of the student population. So it may change our projections about where the long-term trend of our district's going.
Yeah, a lot of the trend that we looked at as in the last 3 years, a lot of that trend was driven by the potential for residential development, and you
Yep.
can't underestimate the impact that the pandemic has had on
Yeah.
on that component of it.
Yep.
The uncertainty that's caused.
Yep.
We have a significant number of home sites going in, well over 125 in the next year to year and a half within
Yeah.
the district. So that will balance some of that demographic slide
Yep.
that typically is seen.
Yep.
We've been the opposite of the demographics of most districts around us.
Right.
When you figure 70 to 75% of the districts in the state of Wisconsin are in declining enrollment.
Yeah.
So at what point do we hit that saturation for development, and what pieces are gonna remain undeveloped, where you don't get that new housing growth and it's
Right.
just based on residential turnaround? That's really gonna be that defining moment, and that's what we try to predict.
Yeah, I brought it up on our board goals discussion yesterday because I wonder if the declining number of students per household will offset what that growth would normally bring in terms of new students to the district if the students per household rate remained what it historically had been. So I think it's something we ought to look at as a board and think about what that long-term trend might be changing from where it's been, right? Because we've been showing this trend of 1%, 2% growth for a really long time, and maybe that's not true anymore.
It'll be interesting because I know our current senior class is really small. So it's one of the very few classes we have that's under 200. So the rebound in some of the elementary numbers, and then we'll be replacing, and that junior class is pretty big.
Okay.
That's currently there. I think it's 230 something. So So your point's really well taken, Steve. It's critical that we continue to monitor this because that's what drives funding is, well, it's property values and it's enrollment, so, but in particular enrollment. So to really monitor to see if things have changed, is it, because we have the housing sites and we have the studies that were done, a number of years ago to project out enrollment, but do the number of kids per household, does that decline? So those are things that it's really important that we monitor.
Larry, you got a question?
Yeah, that was one of the follow-up questions in terms of with this part of it and Steve's comment about the enrollment. How long ago did we do those kinds of population projections and students per household? 'Cause that was
2018.
December of 2016, we presented those to the board.
Okay.
And they were conducted based on the community development in the summer of 16.
So summer of 16, so we're like
5 years.
well
out.
over 5 years out. How often historically have we done those? Probably.
Typically, we'll do an enrollment study. There's different enrollment studies, so we'll do a baseline enrollment study every year as part of the budget development process. We outsource it to add some more analytics to it and look at other factors about every 3 to 4 years with University of Wisconsin Applied Population Labs. And then as we looked in 2016, looking prospectively at the community development, we knew we were fueled by development. A lot of the growth we've had since 1985 has been fueled by residential development in the community. So we wanted to have a clear perspective of what that looked like going forward. That was another external study that was conducted in the summer of 2016 to take a look at that over the next 10 years in a window, and then in the next 20 years in a window.
And I guess maybe my comment on that, and I don't know how frequently or what the best guess is on that, but I think given that it is such a driver for us, or has been a driver in terms of our enrollment and our campus construction and those things, and I know we've got the Swan Farm and probably some other things that are gonna be happening out there, but I mean, it's just almost like, okay, how do we kind of stay more fine-tuned or a little bit more frequent or something like that to be able to say, yeah, we just need to watch that a lot closer, and maybe somewhere in your budget committee or something to address that a little bit tighter or something, but.
Yeah, and we'll be up for the 22-23 fiscal year, that this spring will complete that detailed enrollment study again to take a look in it. That gives us the accuracy report from where the last one was, and also then looks prospectively.
Other questions for John? Otherwise, thank you for that report. Moving down to personnel issues. Currently, we have no resignations or employments. That hasn't changed since the agenda went out. Okay, we do have a leave request.
Yeah, we have one leave request from a teacher at the high school, Christina Calise. I'd take any questions you have, but I'd recommend approval of her leave request.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions? Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Let's move down to board goals and operations. Of course, we've got homecoming coming up this next week here. If you can, it's always fun to participate in the parade. I think some of us are going to do that and get to throw out candy.
Yeah. It's been 2 years.
It's been 2 years, yes. So no hoarding the candy.
It's good to have the parade back.
On the 11th then of October, we'll have business affairs and a regular board meeting. We're keeping the 12th, 13th, and 14th open for interviews for those people that have applied for the vacant seat on the board. 13 and 14 work better for me. If you've got any preferences, please provide those to Julie. So.
Yeah, and those, just as a note, those the window for that closes the 29th, I believe. So we're gonna want to solidify those. We're gonna want to get those times nailed down.
We only need to tell her if we have a conflict with the date, right? Like, I've been quiet because all the dates work.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as Julie knows you're good, then that's what we need to know.
Okay. November, we've got business affairs Oh, October 25th, I missed. Policy is going to meet, Jeannie?
Yes.
Okay, and then the regular meeting, yes, Larry?
I need to go back, because on those nights, in terms of what was there, I have a couple conflicts in terms of the starting time of the meeting, which we haven't talked about yet in terms of
What
whether
time
it,
to start?
well, if we do it at 7 o'clock, I'm fine, but if
Yeah.
we do it at 6, I've got a little bit of a conflict, but,
Did you share that with Julie already?
yes,
Yes.
she
Okay.
sent that. I
Cool.
saw it.
Awesome.
Oh, I forgot the regional meeting. That's going to be the 19th. Who's all going to that? Fantastic. I will not be in town, so thank you for attending that. Sorry, then the 25th, policy and regular meeting, the 8th of November, business affairs, and then the 22nd, just a regular board meeting at 7. So the new calendar is out there as well.
John probably won't be at that meeting, will he?
22nd? John will be
It's a little joke.
hunting.
Pretending to
This, for the mythical
Hey, there was a deer last year.
Yeah.
Although I think Matt got it.
Legislative advocacy is the next item on the agenda. There are some things going on at the state level. I know one of them was about requiring cursive writing at some point in elementary. There's a bill relating to the assessment of reading. The one that I fully support is the Tobacco 21, where they're going to push or suggest to push the vaping age up to 21, which might help us in the high school. So, anything to add to that, John, or?
Yeah, those are a couple of pieces that are out there. There's always ongoing discussions about funding and those kinds of pieces, but yeah, so the School Administrators Alliance has been on record as opposing the reading assessment bill and opposing the cursive writing bill, just so that you're aware of where that advocacy organization, that lobby organization stands on that, and there's information there. You mentioned the Tobacco 21 piece. Obviously, that's a concern we were actually addressing quite a bit before we get into the pandemic. It was something we were communicating to parents quite a bit, and having some educational events here at school as a big concern. So that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out.
The other good news, Mike, is that it looks like the financing for the state is better than what they predicted. So 319 million more than anticipated.
Yep.
Given how essential reading is to student learning, why would they come out in opposition to that bill?
Yeah, so there's a long history of what they've called the reading wars, and it's different philosophies on what's best. So it's not about it's not about putting more effort into reading. Everybody would generally support that. It's about whether this approach to assessment that's being recommended, that's being, there's, like the Wisconsin State Reading Association doesn't like what's being recommended, as an example. So it's philosophical in terms of what is believed to be best for learning. So, and we really should probably spend some time with our reading specialists and really get their take on it as well.
Right. I mean, there was like some of the things, it was like being written with requiring you to use a particular approach and methodology, and you hired trained people in this particular methodology kind of thing. So, I mean, it was, I don't know, it seemed like a little bit like self-serving to a particular vendor or company that was out there, but.
Yeah, it's kind of been going on for a couple of years with pieces of this. There's a lot, and understandably so, a lot of talk about dyslexia and the approaches to dealing with dyslexia, and there's a very specific approach to dealing with that, and to Larry's point, some of what was pushed forward could have been viewed as maybe biased or beneficial to a specific group. So there's all those kinds of things that are wound into this.
Yeah.
And so that's that piece, and usually with cursive writing, it gets to be about local control and whether that's what we should be spending our time on.
I don't have a dog in that fight,
Yeah.
but I think reading is probably the most essential learning skill that we can possibly give our kids.
Yeah, no argument there.
And I think it's unfortunate where we're at in this state in terms of our proficiency levels. I think our district does well, but I think there's a lot of places that they're not equipping the kids for their future.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, literacy reading is, I think everybody pretty much agrees that that's number one, and numeracy then is usually number two, right? In terms of those things, especially when you're talking to earlier, that early literacy piece in particular. So I think this particular bill is just about approaches to assessment and those things. Not, the opposition is not about a devaluing of reading, it's about approach.
Thanks.
And that's a good point, Steve. I mean, that third grade reading level is usually a predictor of future life success for lots of folks, so.
It's a big predictor of if you're going to graduate high school, in third grade, so.
Nothing else on the legislative front. We'll move down to goals for us and the superintendent, and I'm gonna let Larry lead the discussion here.
Mike, do you have a copy of this? I've got.
I do.
I have a copy. You can pull it up.
Yep, I got it here.
So this is something that I've worked on and been involved with for a number of years, and obviously a lot of times we basically bring forward similar things from the prior years. This year particularly, we had upgrade and updates to our strategic planning document. So that was one of the things which we approved just at the previous meeting, and wanted to make sure that everything was in sync and alignment with that. And again, that's going to be part of it, because that's usually, I mean, sorry, Mike, but it's job one, is to really have you carry out the strategic plan and work with the administrative team to make that happen. And so that's some of the work that will be really a focus for the superintendent as well. The next couple, item B on your superintendent goals, really addresses some things. And I think it was reflective, at least in my mind, in conversations with Steve and Brian just yesterday, really to sort of make sure that we stay true to that plan that was prepared and presented in August and approved, because that's really going to be our guiding document, if you will, and making sure that we stay very, very closely in touch with that. And then also, Steve brought in, because of his knowledge in the ESSER funds, that there's some specific funds, Johns, that we have available. So, and apparently that's one of the things, I mean, I think we need to know about and find out how that money is being spent within the district for some of the facility and environmental needs for, and I guess it's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and there's a certain timeline that money has to be spent. So thanks to Steve for bringing that into play with that. Item number C, again, a little bit along these lines, and I think, again, philosophically, where I try to think about this one, is really about what do we do in terms of support of our staff, in terms of their professional development and needs, in terms of being able to address it. And again, the tie-in with Steve's, and I did pull up that ESSER document in the, that's out there. That's where I pulled up a lot more information on it and read a lot more about it, is really to understand that we have an obligation to do some reporting related to the ESSER funds in terms of how they're being spent. Again, to demonstrate how their activities and interventions would be used to respond to the academic, social, and emotional needs of pupils. And one of the things we wanted to add into that for all of the group of administrators is just to make sure that also, as we address the students and the pupils' needs, how do we make sure that we're addressing the staff needs in some of those areas as well? So how do we can kind of maybe come up with a combination of that? Because as you know, I mean, our teachers are really our most valuable asset that we have in the district, and wanting to make sure, one, that they're prepared to do what they need to do with the students, but also to take care of themselves with that. So if you need a little bit more explanation on that, we can talk a little bit more about that, that component of it. The item D, again, we kind of debated that, but I know that there's a deadline, John, in terms of for the funding, in terms of that we had with the referendum money. Some decisions have to be made on that before January or February, somewhere in there?
February. Yep.
Okay, so hopefully that's on one of our board meetings coming up. And we thought this one was maybe just a little bit of an easier, more attainable goal for the superintendent to do, because he'll turn to John and say, John, tell me what you think we should do with this, hopefully. But
your goals become my goals.
yes. Item E on the board, the superintendent goals, I'm sorry. And Mike, I think this is one of those where I think you've kind of like helped shape and define things in terms of your role as a developer and coach, mentor, if you will, for other leaders around the state. But a lot of that is because you've had access now to ASA group?
AASA.
Yeah, AASA group, the CISA group, in terms of your role there, you played a pretty active role, and you attended like the Mid-American Association of School Administrators, the MASA group, also the WASDA School District Administrators. So we definitely want to encourage and continue to support that, but how do we make sure that that's being brought back in, anything that you're learning there, and then how does that get filtered down to your leadership team? So it was like really a fun challenge to look up all of those acronyms and make sure that I hopefully spelled them correctly and had the names of the organizations correctly. Now, if there's other ones that I should add to this, we could probably make those as
I think you got it covered. Yeah.
correctable edits, if you will. And I think it's great. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I know when I attend WASB meetings. I mean, people do look to Pewaukee as having a really strong school board, but strong school leadership. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind about that. So it makes me feel very good, and I'm sure, or I hope that you guys feel the same way, that, you know, when Pewaukee's name is brought up, it's like we're usually in that top tier in terms of school districts around the state and potentially around the country. So I don't know if that's true from what you know, Danielle, and those kinds of things, because we do a lot of good things here and are recognized for that. And then ultimately, the last goal that's there, just kind of keep us in the loop in terms of what might be happening with anything with the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. Again, no pressure on it, just kind of keep us posted as to where that you think you're going to.
Yeah, and we have some training that
What's that?
we're working on with Liz Menzer to get some people like me who it's been, I think, since 2013, so I gotta get updated.
Well,
so.
there's a remedial program, I'm sure, for folks like that.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and the
board.
process has changed too.
Yeah.
So board goals, we play off of that, and obviously the strategic plan is something that, again, is near to all of us, and again, we'll continue to do the learn about. And I think while we don't have some like real quantitative board goals, we've kind of turned these into our own need for education. And that's, I think, important fundamentally for all of the community to understand that when we delve into some of these topics, it's really for us as board members to become more knowledgeable, more aware, that we have insight in terms of how these programs are developed and what we want to learn and need to learn to be official and oversight for what goes on in the school district. So we ask for these things specifically. And again, one of the things is the whole approach to the plan that was approved in August and making sure that you stay in touch with us. Obviously, you do that through the emails that get sent out and shared with the other members of the community, parents, et cetera, with that. But again, just taking that oversight kind of role in terms of that and playing a real active when we need to make decisions that the board is fully aware and informed of the decisions and the rationale for making some of those decisions and recommendations going forward. And then the same thing is true about the professional development of the staff. And again, for me, that's kind of one of the things. It's like, okay, again, the school district is driven based on what goes on in the classroom and making sure that we are aware of all of the things that we are doing to support our students, and the teachers in the classroom is a big part of it. And then finally, and the facility master plan, again, just kind of keeping us the oversight on that. And that probably will kind of phase out, but I know, John, that that's one of the things. And I'm a big proponent of this because I've seen way too many school districts. I've seen a lot of other organizations where they don't keep their district facilities up to date. That's one of the things, again, I'm very proud of it. When you look around our buildings, look at our classrooms, look at all the things other than, yes, it was finally time, John, to fix that bathroom over there. It was pretty stinky bad. Because when you don't do that, those are the things where you're then left with less than optimal buildings for people to work in, for students to come and use in terms of the classrooms and the facilities that we offer. And I think the fact that we maintain our facilities at a very high level. So while it may kind of change or modify, I think your responsibilities and John's as it relates to the facilities does not go away. I mean, it's always job one for you, and obviously tied in with the strategic plan part of it. So keep those bathrooms up to date. So. That was one of the things too I was wanting to make, and I forgot to earlier. The whole access for the bleachers, wheelchair accessibility and spaces made now available for the people that can attend the football and athletic events. There's ramps on both sides, both the visitors and the home side of it. So those are things that we have to and are obligated to do in terms of offering that out there. And then finally, we'll continue to work on our own board working relationships and our understanding of our roles and responsibilities, and particularly use that WASB school perception survey. We'll get another chance to kind of take an assessment with that, hopefully. That's usually, we try to do that in the late October, November timeframe, so that we have some results available when hopefully we can work with Mike and Melissa Mazzarazzo in terms of the January timeframe on Mike's mid-year evaluation with that. So I think it's just all of those things then. And I know as we bring a new school board member on board in hopefully the next few weeks, we'll have an opportunity to introduce that board member to the survey tool and have that board member participate in it. They won't have the advantage of a whole lot of lead time in terms of their orientation process, but maybe we can put them on the accelerated program, Stacy, thanks to your input from last year. So we can address those things. So that was kind of the take on it. This did occur we had a chance to meet with Steve and Brian, or I had a chance yesterday to meet with them at our official meeting place, Panera's, on a Sunday afternoon, and I think we accomplished a lot. Steve, Brian, anything you want to add to this or not?
Well, I appreciate you getting this out. I don't think I'm prepared to vote on this or anything like this. I feel like I need to pour over this a little bit because I wasn't able to see your email during the day. So unless there's an objection, I'd like to push this to October 11th meeting. That works. Sound good?
I think that makes sense, since everyone is just seeing it.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. And if you have questions, just one way to Larry. Just send them to Larry, okay? And you can collect all that input and probably come up with a revision that we can look at.
Thank you, Larry, for putting this all together.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Last item under board operations, we're going to get an update on what COVID is doing for us.
Yeah, not a lot new here. I sent you the draft update, and we'll see if any data changes tomorrow. It's been just kind of steady. It's cases have remained at a certain kind of level. We're in yellow again this week in terms of our model. Cases had kind of ticked up and then, dropped over the weekend, and so I think the 7-day average was at 6. In terms of what I pushed out to you today, internally cases have not really jumped. I mean, they moved. We had 2 weeks ago, we had more of them at PLE. Last week, we had more of them at the high school, but no major jumps in any buildings. So, knock on wood, things have been going pretty well. So really so really the report is it's really status quo at this week.
Any questions? Thanks, Mike. That'll get rolled out then tomorrow.
Yeah, I always wait until the end of the, because it's always a Tuesday report, so I want to see what the data is on Tuesday, and then we send it out late in the day to push that out.
All right.
Here's one thing that we need to do. Miranda had sent out around an email in terms of
I
I get to, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Everybody heard what Larry said?
Yep.
For the school board week?
Yep.
Thank you, Larry. Next item on the agenda is comments from citizens, if there's any more comments. Okay. Hearing that, then I look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nobody ever opposes. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.